Welcome to What Would Sabrina Say? I'm Sabrina Dong, and I'm excited you're joining me today. In this podcast, I dive into mental health topics on relationships and overall well-being. With over 20 years of experience as a licensed clinical social worker, I share insights and invite expert guests who are passionate about making a positive difference. I started this podcast because I was frustrated with the often misleading or recycled information in social media involving self-help and the mental health field. My goal is to provide you with genuine, useful content that's educational and informative. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you find our conversations both enlightening and empowering. I'm glad you're here. Hi, welcome to What Would Sabrina Say? I'm your host, Sabrina Dong, licensed clinical social worker. Here with me today, I have Louis Gale. Louis, I'm so excited to hear about your journey, your books, internationally known, and just sharing about your experience and just groundbreaking work on higher consciousness. So, thank you for joining.
First, thank you for having me. I mean, the way I'm thinking about it is, even if just one person hears this and resonates with it and finds that it could potentially be transformational, like that to me is like, yes. If two people do it, oh my gosh, So, I mean, obviously the numbers can increase from there. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like you kind of hit the nail on the head. It is a volume series that I'm working on. 2 are available now, but I'm planning 6. And so the story itself is like one giant story. So when you read the first book, there's not even chapters yet, because chapter 1 doesn't start until the second book. So the first book is very stream of consciousness. I want you inside the mind of the character, the first book being on psychosis. What are the thoughts? Now, obviously, the first book is a novella, but you can't just have one giant stream of consciousness. Like even right now, my stream of consciousness is aware that there's books behind me. My stream of consciousness is aware there's there's all these different settings. So if you were reading a book that was heavily focused on stream of consciousness, you still need to know what's going on. So that's where the fictional world gets to take place. But what's really exciting is that page numbers will continue, the chapters will continue. So I'm 100 pages into the third book, but technically that's still like 500 pages in, because from the first book to the second book, page numbers, chapters, they all continue. So that's kind of been fun to piece together this big, giant book. It's like a never-ending story. And it's also interesting because what I thought might be at one moment, the characters of the book sometimes will point me in different directions. Have this character that is 100 million years old in terms of consciousness. But it's like, what would be the math as a writer? How can I make that to a reader make sense? Create these rules. Like when you're reading Harry Potter, you're not thinking, wait a second, brooms can't fly. I don't buy this. Like you accept the rules of wizardry. So the more dynamic some of your characters, if they're from different dimensions or beings made of light or energy or elementals, you have to still create a framework where the reader can still believe it. So although all these books are fiction, I also personally think everything is fiction. I'm 40 years old. Technically, I don't know what happened 41 years ago. I trust the history books, but I actually didn't experience it. And again, that's a solipsistic way of thinking, what the world revolves around you. No, I know the world revolves around everybody in their own world. But in terms of consciousness and fiction, I mean, I wasn't there during the Civil War. I wasn't there during the Egyptian times. It happened, but I know that from books. So it's fiction, technically. And so that's a slippery slope to kind of go down, because then you start to think, well, okay, Earth is 4.6 billion years ago. I wasn't there then. And then the universe is 13.6 billion. I wasn't there then. Well, what about 14 billion years ago? So you can start to kind of like play these mind games in your own mind to expand your levels, but it's all fiction. But again, everything is fiction.
Right. So your book is around exploring self-portrait on psychosis is the one title, and higher my consciousness.
So this is the first one. It's a written self-portrait on psychosis. The second one is Orange, a written self-portrait on tragedy. The third book will be Yellow, and then obviously Green, Blue, Purple. So I want the 6 books to each have this specific color aura to it. But the way I look at even the most advanced consciousness is going to have their moments in the trenches of thought. So that first book, A Written Self-Portrait on Psychosis, it's almost like psychosis is writing this book. And so that's where the A Written Self-Portrait comes in. All the books are of the same title, A Written Self-Portrait on Psychosis, A Written Self-Portrait on Tragedy. The third one will be A Written Self-Portrait on Science/Fiction with a question mark, because again, what is fiction? So yeah, the theme is really based on letting the reader kind of go within the subtexts of these really big ideas. You know, we're both studying psychology and, from Freud and Jung, the archetypes and our dreams, they're very built along one idea, and that's being human. And so we can kind of say, even though we all have these individual experiences, we all have these individual paths we walk as human beings, we definitely deal with these grand themes. So I think some can handle it better than others. Like I said, the first book that I wrote, I finished it while living in Berlin for 2 years. Or hindsight wise, maybe I did break my own brain. I mean, really, because when I came back, I just wasn't ready to be back. And so, I took this year of silence. And in that silence, I found everything, but also silence doesn't function in this world. We just we can't navigate our society in silence. So I was put into a mental hospital for a while, and so there's all these different paths. But then as a writer, it's like, how can I make that exaggerated and then kind of understood at a level that somebody who might not have had a similar path can still resonate with, or somebody who had an even more severe path can also resonate with. And I think that's the brilliance of fiction, is you get to create these characters that basically share ideas. I always think, because I have some of my ear tattooed, and I understand Van Gogh, but it's like I always question, well, what if he didn't chop his ear off? Would we even know him? Probably not. I mean, there's just so many levels of what we do that then create who we become. And it's like, in the pits of despair, it's hard to realize that there's another day, there's another week, you're going to be, and then sometimes you don't realize that. And next thing you know, you chop your ear off, or worse, and so that's where I think the balance of an artist kind of comes in. It's like, okay, I don't have to chop my ear off, but I can certainly like tattoo it a bit, or something that but then again, that becomes a slippery slope, because we see that with particular ailments, self-mutilation, there's definitely like balances that have to be struck. But obviously in some of these psychotic moments of the first book, I didn't really realize what was going on until I can then put pen to paper. So sometimes writing is the best therapy. I mean, I know that's a cliche, but like, I don't know, it literally is sometimes.
Talking through things and talk therapy is one thing, but I think expressing, and I'm training also in expressive arts, it just taps into something totally different within a person to be able to express, whether it's drawing, writing, it's really a different experience. When you're talking about your period of silence, and when you look at your entire life after across a lifespan, it's probably going to feel like a moment you had. But it reminded me of, when you think of monks in Tibet, or people who go purposely to a retreat, right, and do silent retreats. And
Well, I was on my way to Vipassana in Kathmandu, Nepal, and I had a horrible feeling in the airport of Berlin, like really a bad, bad feeling. In fact, I was leaving Berlin. I was going to go to Kathmandu for this Vipassana 10-day meditation silent retreat. I go into the bathroom. I start hyperventilating. I'm crying because for whatever reason, I was just so thinking, I'm about to die. I'm going to my death. And so I'm in line at the airport waiting, and I just literally look up and I'm like, please just cancel this. And literally that next moment, the flight got canceled, and I was very relieved. Well, a week later in 2015, that big earthquake hit Kathmandu, destroying thousands of temples, including the one I was going to be at. So it was like, oh, but that idea of silence never went away. And then it's almost like, well, what is going to a retreat versus living a retreat? Now, obviously, it's really hard that year, I mean, it's just kind of a circumstance that just happened. But, when you have your mom on her hands and knees crying and begging you to talk with this social worker because nobody knows what's going on, that's where, when you look back, hindsight wise, I really hurt a lot of people along the way. But again, in the moment, it's not that at all. In the moment is, I know that's my mom, but in the moment, I am traversing intradimensional planes of existence of thought, and words are not allowed. And yes, I know you're my mom, but I'm also not you. You are not me. And so there's this bridge that should never be crossed. And that's kind of what my books are doing, hopefully, is giving you a inside view to some of that, because fiction allows for me to, again, it's not a biography, it's not an autobiography, it's not a memoir. None of it is real except in the sense where it's real in the ideas of it. So, but it can be challenging to realize later what your sacrifices of your own life, the impacts you've had on others. But obviously, this is a decade ago, and yeah, but still, it's always kind of there sometimes.
Your journey up to this point in writing the books, was it around the moment of silence and sort of what you went through at that time, uh, and those struggles that led to it?
Yeah, well, the first book was finished while living in Berlin. I didn't do the silence until I came back. So I had my heart broken before I even started writing the book. And I wrote this introduction to the book. And the introduction is the first thing when you open the first book. It's introduction. And it's almost like some of my family, when I would share just the introduction, they thought it was like a manifesto because it's kind of violent. I mean, it is. The first book is Red. It deals with psychosis. But again, it's fiction. But the first idea of the book kind of came to be when it was like thinking fictionally about all the heartbreak I've experienced and just the metaphor in my mind. But in the book, the character wants to see what is it like to just think about buying a hammer to smash somebody's head in. And so that's kind of where the book begins, psychosis. Obviously, it extends way beyond that. In fact, after I finished the introduction about this character, seeing what it's like to buy a hammer to smash somebody's head in, I closed my computer and I wouldn't write for over a year because I was like, what am I writing? But in that year, I would find myself leaving the States, traveling through Europe and a VW to 14 countries. I got engaged. I mean, my hair grew out. I experienced life and love and all these different things. And so my second time in Amsterdam, I found finally, after a year of not writing, kind of in search of this character. What's your name, character? And in Amsterdam, on the Amstel River, actually, Amstel was the name. So the character's name is Amstel Jack. And in that, when I got back from that 4 months and traveling through Europe, I mean, it was like a writing machine just with that name, Amstel, came, but it was so much different than the original introduction. So that was actually a much needed year break because, again, like I just didn't want that in the world. So, spoiler, he doesn't smash the person's head in, but that's okay, obviously. But when I would share some of this introduction with family and friends, I mean, some of them even were like, what are you writing? Like, what is this? So, I mean, it could be different at times. But again, I remember I got my book into certain university libraries because I've submitted it to libraries. Yeah. So it's at Harvard, it's at Berkeley, UCLA. Yeah. It's like, yeah. But then also one of the librarians at first was like, oh, I glanced through it, but I don't know if it's really academic enough. And I was like, you read it or you glanced through it? She's like, well, I flipped through pages. And I'm like, yes, because that's how you read books these days. You just kind of flip through. We kind of smirked at each other. And then she read it, and now the books are on shelves. So that kind of makes me feel a little bit, the validity of, even though some of these ideas are out there, it
Right.
still is rewarding to know that if you went to harvard.com and put in Louis Gale, you could check my book out. So
That's
yeah,
amazing.
that's nice.
Especially, first set of books, right? First time publishing.
Yeah,
And
I mean, yeah, it's a whole other thing because there's so many avenues of publishing now. So I get to use word of mouth, and my book is at Barnes and Noble and Amazon, books at Walmart in 25 countries, but also it's through word of mouth. So even though it's at Walmart, if you don't know of the book or you don't know me, it's not on shelf at Walmart. This is like the hardest thing, like to have this little barcode with this Haas and Jenkins. Like to me, it's just like, it still kind of blows my own mind that hundreds of years from now, it's still living in its own way.
That's amazing. Congrats to that.
Thank you.
That's
Yeah.
such an accomplishment. And I was just wondering what the books mean to you in writing them.
Well, it's definitely not vindication or not acknowledgement. But, when I was in Europe, I had a choice to make. I had to sell my condo near the beach to continue my Europe excursion. And I hadn't even started writing the book yet. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, no, I want to write this grandiose, the great novel, And so I came back from Berlin in 2015. 9 years later, the first book gets published in 2024 because I did my year of silence. I was in a mental hospital. There's all these different paths. And also, I didn't really think it was going to get published because it was so different. There's no chapters. It's very, some of the, even one of the reviews on Amazon, like this guy, he wrote, as long as you like books that have a lot of ellipses and random words capitalized, because it is inside this mind. So maybe there's a big what the F in giant words because the thought was so powerful. So it doesn't really fit to the standard mode of writing. So for 5, 6, 7 years, I didn't even think I had anything until one day I was like, well, let me just send it around a couple of places. And luckily, it got picked up. And then I realized, oh, there's even more to it. And so then I began chapter 1. I was like, Louis, you haven't even written chapter 1 yet. Now we go back to what was all of that year of silence? What was the year on the streets and all that? And that's book 2. Like the character is in a real predicament by the end of the first book. I don't want to spoil it, but you're going to realize at the end of the first book, which gives you the sneak peek. So each book gives you the next book beginning. That's kind of my own way to allow myself to know what's happening. So by the end of the first book, when you get to chapter 1, which is still in the first book, sneak peek, I never even knew that was in me, from dimensional beings and elementals. And it sounds science fiction-y until you realize it's kind of all within our minds. And so what is science fiction-y about, like, just thinking about some of the ideas, if you realize they're all just ideas? I mean, technically, every religious book, every science book, every single thing we have is in a book. It's just a book. And so technically, once you understand that, you can kind of have free range. Now, I'm not saying like all religious books are wrong or whatever it is, but I mean, we are humans. We tell stories. So the books mean a great deal to me because not only is it giving sanity to my own insanity, pun or not pun, depending on perspective, but it's also so far resonating with people. Like I have reviews on Amazon. I have some reviews on Barnes and people seem to actually be interested in it. And that is even more so rewarding because it's one thing to paint your self-portrait, but then to find out that others like it too. I mean, not that we need each other's validation, but I'm not going to lie. Sometimes it feels good to open up Amazon and be like, I got a new review. It's like one of the greatest things ever.
Right. Was there any vulnerability in this process? I was thinking when you said about sharing and it feels good, and I'm thinking I paint, right? I paint abstract, but when people ask for something or say they like it, it feels vulnerable because of just I know where I'm at in the moment of creating it and what it means to me. But I was wondering, is that the same experience as a writer sometimes, or
Absolutely. In fact, I still sometimes I love my first book, but I love the second book even more because I can literally open it up at any page, start reading, and it will resonate. That's the whole or written self-portrait is every page has something. But some of this writing in the second book, there's a council of these dimensional beings. And the idea came where I grew up extremely Christian in a Christian household, youth groups, all that kind of stuff. But I remember like in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form. It's like, that's it. That's all the words it took. I mean, in terms of dimensionality and universality, there might be a few more words needed. So I have these dimensional beings, but literally the vulnerability came when I would have to pull over to the side of the road because it was almost like the dimensionals were telling me, oh no, this is the next haiku like poem that dictates mere reflections. But those mere reflections can be into your eyes of the soul. And so it's like, but if I didn't capture that, little moment of really weird writing because it's dimensional writing. It's like I would have never gotten it again. And I can never, sometimes I even have to go back and I'm like, it doesn't make sense even to me now, but then it also does make sense if I put myself back in this like mindset of, oh no, it's just beyond human. And so in those moments, like the beyond human aspect, it's very vulnerable because I feel so tiny compared to my own ideas because the ideas seem to be coming sometimes, like to have that NOTW, not of this world. Well, it's like, no, all of that is of this world because like they're all on Earth. Like, okay, but what is a different dimensional plane that is actually not of this world? And so that's where it can get kind of scary at times because you realize like it's not even about the insignificant of a speck among specks. It's like the speck among specks was billions of years ago. It's that insignificant. And it's just like, what do we all do? And in our minds, it's not insignificant because we're living these lives. And so that's the issue. It's like, what is a 75, 85, 100-year-old lifespan? I mean, if all of us were just born 100 years ago, none of us are here right now. So what is this thing called death? Can you tap into even like a glimpse of just a momentary glimpse? And in that glimpse, though, of like that absolute nothing, you then realize the very next moment, oh, I'm still here. So it's still something. But in that little moment of glimpsing something that is way beyond, there's a lot of information to be understood and to write upon and reflect upon and meditate on. And that's kind of where the vulnerability can come in because it's way beyond anything I've ever thought of, or at least what I grew up with, or things of just standardized ideas. And so it's, yeah, how do you make it make sense? You talk about abstract artwork, I mean, even Jackson Pollock, who's one of my favorites, like there's an actual algorithm to some of his work, and you could actually almost use Fibonacci sequences to kind of see the potential spiral that unfolded at just different levels. And so even in these abstract ideas, I think you'll still somehow, if you're in the right mindset, find like, oh no, that's not that abstract to me, you know? And Picasso, I mean, Picasso, he was one of the greatest painters of all time. He could literally do anything. He could paint exactly the Mona Lisa. He could paint exactly the Sistine Chapel. But that was already done. It wasn't until he just was just like, let me just shift some perspectives, cubism, that then he became who he was. So in terms of the vulnerability really comes in terms of potentially redefining genres and redefining what writing could even be.
No, yeah. And even with my own abstract paintings, people will tell me it looks like a landscape, like every time. I don't start that way, but it turns into some sort of landscape, sunset, or some, mountain. Yeah, it's interesting how you can see patterns in our
Yeah,
work.
I think even Jung, he's very into the patterns of humanity and the archetypes that we have. I mean, in one of the
Mhm.
classes I took, we had to like really dive deep into Jungian and Freudian. And this is my thing is like, I appreciate all the work and the psychoanalysis and all that. But at the end of the day, it's like when Freud and Jung, they're analyzing these dreams, it's like, that's great for your dream. As somebody in one of my classes was like, there is this collective unconscious that we share. And I just asked, like, so you've dreamed of my grandfather? And it was like, well, no. I'm like, okay, so then it's not really a collective unconscious. It's your own collective unconscious. But if you're dreaming of my grandfather, then yeah, then you're tapped out. But most likely somebody in India is not going to dream of my grandfather. I mean, you hear about twin studies and people sometimes having conversations in their dreams. And so that is a reality, but how far can you expand it? I'm a very realistic person. I like the reality. It's just that my reality is way out there, but there's still an actual science to it. Like one of the things I'm always thinking about, I wonder what other advanced civilizations are thinking. Are they looking at it? Are they humored by it? I think who's to say what other advanced technologies or civilizations are actually thinking. And what I'm saying sound like science fiction, except that it's not though. That's what I'm trying to say is that even like Carl Sagan, men of science admit statistically, it's actually to think we're alone is actually the not correct way of thinking. Even now, with them acknowledging aerial phenomena and UFO, and that's all being unclassified. So, what is conspiracy now is kind of a whole different thing, especially when it comes to things that relate around science.
Hey, I was wondering if you could tell me what it's been like studying conscious psychology and transformation while writing these books.
Yeah, I mean, so I just had my last paper. So, I'm actually about to graduate with my master's in CPT, consciousness, psychology, transformation from the John F. Kennedy School of Social Sciences, which is it's like a gem. It was founded in the 60s by the Kennedy family as like the first holistic, fully accredited psychology program where I guess the core idea I would say about studying consciousness, psychology, transformation, I'll just say CPT now. The core idea is that I got to take a class on ancient shamanism. I got to take a class in myth and lore and things that are not so ordained psychology. Obviously, you study it all. 2,000 years ago, a shaman tapping into the ethereal plane of Mother Earth would be revered as a holy person, while somebody today might not be seen the same way in Western culture. So, Western culture is quick to diagnose, we're quick to prescribe, we're quick to continue that remedy because we think that's what it is. I mean, you talk about monks and shaman. There's so many other alternatives to consciousness, to psychology. A lot of it is cultural. A lot of it is language. When I lived in Berlin for 2 years, I had to learn the language on a visa. And so I studied German and I started thinking, we think in English, but they're thinking in German and others are thinking in France and others are thinking in different languages. So how you think really does dictate your behavior. And especially like some languages are more harsh than others. Some are more eloquent and love sounding, and some are of completely different alphabets. I can't even, or some are backwards to forward. I mean, there's just so many different ways language is processed. But to take it from this consciousness perspective, because literally we are defined by our thoughts. Those thoughts create behaviors, the behaviors are actions. And so those big three really are, I guess, can be seen consciously. So although some are using it to become clinicians, I wanted to actually go into this program to change my own life. So one of the first classes I took was on integral life practices. And I had to build this map of my own lifestyle. And I realized, wow, I'm drinking every day, I'm smoking every day. Part of what I should do is find out how to stop that, especially if it's not healthy living. So I don't want to be a hypocrite. I want to practice what I preach. And so I also did this paper on habits and addictions, where my core finding was wait until 19 to do anything. I didn't have my first cigarette until I was 25. And so when I quit last year, at 39, it was actually really easy. One day of not smoking, and I had no cravings because I didn't depend on it at 13, 14. My lungs were already formed. My mindset, my chemistry was not linked to the habit. But if you start smoking at 13, 14, that can be a lot harder to break. Same with alcohol. But part of this paper on habits and addictions looked at social media and technology because, again, I'm 40. I don't have any kids, but my first cell phone at 17 was a flip phone. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I had a flip phone. You put the antenna up. I don't know. And we had some debate in our class about like, well, sometimes you just want to give your kid the iPad and have a break. You know what I mean? And that's fine. But your mom or dad probably didn't raise you that way. You are not familiar with what this technology, this is unproven ground. Like, Australia has just banned social media until you're 16. That's so important.
And there's a lot of great research coming out of Australia right now too around social media use and effects. And I read one article that it causes dementia like symptoms early on for young adults now with excessive use of social media, of the internet, seeing cognitive decline. Yeah.
I loved college. I did 7 years. I sent out my graduation. Yeah, I loved university. Like, it's the greatest thing. But I don't know if it's the same as it was in the 2000s when I went.
I was wondering, you mentioned wanting to be a prof and teach, but what any ideas for your PhD that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so I'm actually looking at a school. It's called the Chicago School, and they have an international psychology program. And part of one of the papers I did was on political discord in the States. And I realized when I had to redo my real ID, there were only three boxes to click: independent, Democrat, Republican. I chose independent, but also by living in Europe for a couple years, they have 6, 7, 8 major parties. And so the thing about Europe is even if you win an election, it's maybe like 25% a majority, but you're not having the other 75% hate you because you have all these different ideas of parties. Where in the States right now, the politics has not only like spread into things that should no longer be politicized, like women's choices, healthcare, education. Now politics is literally everywhere. And
Uh-huh.
the visceral hatred based on these only basically two options has become apparently clear. So my PhD dissertation idea is to try to implement and really go into how to get more parties in the States. America First, Republican, whatever you want to call it. So you would actually have to have some form of like, there's Republican and then there's MAGA Republican. But just
A
like there's
spectrum.
Democrat, Mondani just won as a Democrat socialist. So there's now Democrat socialist. So extending what it is the first step. I don't know if we're ever going to be having how you have the Green Party and a Labor Party and all these different things like Britain. That's been tried. We had the Tea Party. We had all these different ideas of parties. What you need is just keep what it is, but just give more options. And so I feel like a lot of people aren't willing to grow because they're afraid of those growing pains. But that's why we're having so many issues, is that people are afraid to admit when they're wrong, which, if anything, that's the sign of the most strength, is to admit when you're wrong. You don't want to put on a blame game when going into politics, as easy as it is, but it doesn't really get anywhere.
It's different times, and that's why I created my podcast of like, you have people who are just, coming online now, influencers as experts who are just regurgitating stuff or not citing anything, saying things are research when it's actually controversial. And I wanted a platform for actual people of expertise, people who genuinely want to help, who um, have the knowledge to share and can talk to people about how to help in ways that aren't harms kind of the flip side that people who have expertise or knowledge are not seen as such.
I guess I'm lucky because I just signed contracts. I'm not doing anything yet for, but I just signed the contracts for my third book, which is different than the series. So basically, the third book, and I've signed contracts, we're already going into the pages and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be called Masters in Psychology. And basically, what I'm doing is just showing what the actual master's was. So it's basically just the publication of all these papers. And the whole idea of this reference book is, with references, is to show like, not only is it possible for anybody to be an expert, it's just you have to I devoted 2 years. I was taking 6 classes at a time sometimes. I had to write a 10-page paper, a 10-page paper, a 10-page, and then a midterm. But that's the thing. If you're not wanting to do that, the least people can do is trust those. that do decide to do that. And so that's where I hope humanity starts to like look forward. It's like, okay, you know what? I'm not smart enough to be a medical doctor. I'm not. I have the worst practice. I can't take tests. In fact, I failed my driving test twice, and I had to get a note from a doctor to get almost like a special needs test where I had headphones because I do. Maybe it's dyslexia, maybe it's I don't know what it is, but like I can't do a standardized test, which means I would never be able to become a medical doctor because I'll never pass an MCAT. But my cousin, who is a doctor, was like, "Oh no, that's what those standardized tests are. They're testing a specific type of
Yeah.
knowledge, a standardized knowledge that you need to be a medical doctor, for you to be a Juris Doctorate, JD. So the PhD, the master's, that kind of gives you this philosophy. That's what a PhD is, philosophy doctorate. I don't have to take a test, but I have to write 200 pages of my own idea that maybe my medical doctor cousin might not be able to do. So it's really about finding your own level of like brilliance, but then not feeling bad if you're not brilliant at certain things. Like, Simone
Yeah.
Biles, she's a genius when it comes to kinesthetic types of intelligence. For her to do a backflip on a balance beam, she's a genius. She's not going to do open heart surgery, but the open heart surgeon doesn't have control of his body the way it does. So there's so many different types of intelligences, so many different types of genius out there. But what happens is humans feel like, or some do, that they have to either know it all or they have to be in charge of the information they're knowing. No, see, that's where we're getting in these issues now. Measles is back. Like actual, like what? How is that possible? Because people did their own research. I see.
Yes. So, I was wondering if you could talk to me about your role in peer support for National Alliance on Mental Illness.
Yeah, NAMI.
Think that role is so valuable for people to connect to others, have an understanding, who have knowledge like you shared, and health, their own experience, mental health. So yeah, if you could share a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness, and AMI is one of the best organizations. If I ever get to go on Jeopardy or Celebrity Jeopardy and I have an organization that I get to give charity to, it would be NAMI. And I actually first was introduced to it when I was 4 years old. My cousin, adopted cousin, her name was Monica, and she had schizophrenia, and she was murdered on Skid Row when I was 4 years old, 1989. And it went unsolved. But 2 years ago, they actually found who did it and put him in jail, which was a family win. But NAMI was something my aunt was part of, like in the 80s, growing up with an adopted child who had schizophrenia. And her path was on the meds, off the meds, on the meds, off the meds, like so many do. And then one time off of meds, that was it for her. So when I redid NAMI, when I got out of the mental hospital and, was clear, and there's two levels you can do it at. A peer support specialist where you, the individual, have had some issues with it, or like my aunt did, where she's a family member of somebody who has some type of mental illness. So I took an 80-hour course, got a certificate. It's called an MPSS, Medi-Cal Peer Support Specialist. And basically what that allows is, if ever needed, now, I actually went through a Riverside County interview, but they hired from within. But that's okay, because what this organization does is, instead of sending a social worker to somebody on the streets, or instead of sending the police to somebody that might be dealing with mental illness, how about somebody who just also experienced it? And what the organization helps with is not only that first point of contact, not police, not social worker, just person that also lived it, so they could talk at that level. They're also kind of like your point of contact. If you live on the streets for a while because of mental illness, you probably don't have ID. You probably don't have things that you need in terms of getting back into society. And that peer support specialist helps with that as well. And so there's two levels to the organization, like peer support or family member, and each one has its own path. So yeah, it's a really fantastic organization. Anybody can be part of it, NAMI.org. Like I did a 5K walk for them. They're always doing little charity things and just different outreach programs Yeah, so that's definitely something that helped me as well. The 80-hour course that I took was so therapeutic in itself. So even just getting certified as a peer support specialist helped me after I got out of some of the self-inflicted predicaments.
Yeah, and I think it's great because we don't know when something happens in life where we might need support, right? And where we might be struggling and not being afraid to accept it and to reach out or to also give back as well too after having those times.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like I think the way I really want to give back is my books. The first book, it deals with psychosis. It's heavy themes. One of my cousins had heart palpitations reading some of it. But again, it's fiction. And the whole idea of it is that there is light at the end of the tunnel. It's just that some of that tunnel for some is longer, and some of that light might be like a pinprick of light. And so, what does that look like when you're basically in darkness? And that's the acknowledgement that I feel like a lot of people don't acknowledge. They just want to either fast forward past some of the darker moments of mental health or darker moments to things that make someone make wrong choices that seem wrong only from an outside perspective. But like I said, if someone's shouting at the moon and to you, that's crazy because they're just yelling at a moon or they're yelling at a street sign. But also, there's a way to potentially eventually know, like to the person, are you aware that you're shouting at the moon? 'Cause that's a whole other thing when you're aware of it. Like, in fact, they even did, and I love this study that like people who talk to themselves are way more intelligent, have less issues than those who don't. Because just talking to yourself sometimes, I mean, I'm not going to lie, sometimes I have literally screamed out in the middle of a grocery store sometimes. I just had to do it. I, it's better for me to have that cathartic moment. Google Louis Gale. I've done that before. I've been asked to leave places. I know, okay, I'm leaving. Okay. Thank you. I know what I'm doing. It's just sometimes the world is too much that those moments allow for me to feel better. So
Yeah, the
that
release.
sometimes, yeah. And as long as you never actually hurt anybody or like force your beliefs on others, I mean, that's like the key. That's the new golden rule. Like, don't hurt anybody and don't force others to believe what you believe. Unfortunately, like we're seeing a world where a lot of beliefs are being forced. That's
So looking forward to hearing about your work and your PhD and how that
yeah. So
goes.
yeah, I mean, you can basically, I just tell people if you just Google Louis Gale, the books show up because you can get the books Amazon, Barnes and Noble, everywhere you buy books, indie bookstores, it's there. And then I'm also my social media that I like to interact with is LinkedIn. So Louis Gale on LinkedIn, but also I'm on Instagram, but I don't respond really on Instagram. Yeah, it's just something. I'm normal. I'm human. I'm on Instagram too. See? And my fourth book on a written self portrait is on politics. So the third book I'm finishing, I'm 100 pages into the third book, but it goes into on politics, but not earthly politics. Too easy. I have this idea for universality, galactic politics, where basically, how can you have these competing sides of so many different views? Maybe one group of ideas needs this person in charge, and one group needs the exact opposite in charge. How can both be in charge? It's really simple. Put one on this planet, one on another planet, and the harmony, the balance of equations works. But then what is the other side of that equation? That's where it gets fun.
That would be really interesting to read. And thanks so much for your time today, Lewis, and sharing about your journey, your amazing book series, and congratulations on the publications of them, as well as not only being an author internationally, as well in your studies, and looking forward to hearing about your PhD as well too. Thanks so much for your time today.
Really appreciate it, Sabrina. Thank you.